Hello, everybody. This is Kops Office Hours. Today is Friday, June 19th. I'm your moderator, facilitator, John Myers. I work for Proofpoint. A reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be put on the internet. Please be mindful of the code of conduct, which is basically to be a good person. I've put a link to the agenda in the Zoom chat. Please feel free to put your name to the on the attendees list and add any items you'd like to discuss to the agenda in the appropriate place. And with that, we'll get started. Cyprian, you have adding, yep.
First few things, well, more. So first one is to add Oli Marcus as a reviewer. I think you were saying that his 3 months are ending, well, since he's a member of Kubernetes, are ending on June 24th. So I think it's a good time to discuss this. He's been quite active in the project, so I don't know.
I would say welcome aboard.
Okay, so if anyone could approve that PR, I think this would make it official.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Containerd, yep, Containerd.
Okay, so some guys from SIG Storage approached me and Peter to help them test SE Linux on CentOS. Once we got into that, we found out that Containerd doesn't build run C with SE Linux support. So if we want to help them, we would have to use the binaries from Docker, which already have this support enabled. So this would be only a temporary thing because I already submitted PRs that were merged for Containerd. So next Containerd will be SE Linux enabled, and because this is 1.19, I don't think there's any chance we will ship with the current Docker version. So I know that Justin is not a fan of using Docker binaries again.
I'm not a fan of the sourcing from that particular location. We've had our troubles with that in the past, but I guess
that's one thing that we should discuss after we take a decision here. So maybe let's discuss this. I know you're not a fan because of the location. Yes, I know we lost various things from them because they changed stuff in the past. But being temporary, I think it shouldn't hurt us.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Can I ask, is it technically possible today to override the Containerd location? So like to point to a, I presume there's a CI build or something of your change to Containerd. Is it technically possible to repoint kops to use that tar file or tar.gz file?
We would have to add something that was started some time ago, but by one guy. There is no way to point to a tar.gz, but it's pretty much trivial to add such a feature.
Would it be possible to host the tar.gz in the same place we host kops today, just so that when Docker decides to do what Docker does, we don't run into issues?
That was something that I wanted to propose now. Since we are no longer using the RPM and Debian files, we are pretty much down to very few targzs. So let's say one targz or two if we take into account containerd per release. So wouldn't be that much of a trouble to host them somewhere.
Yeah, it would be good if I don't want to host other people's binaries. It would be good if the containerd project or whatever these binaries are were built in the same way that kops is going to be built. So goes into the same like Kate's artifacts location. It might be that's further away, and so we might have to, if it's building a friendly repo, as it were, or like a very a neighborly repo, then we can probably build it ourselves and do that.
So for containerd itself, I know that well, people in Kubernetes upstream had some discussions with them to provide more binaries, including run64. They didn't agree on something, so Kubernetes ended up having a nightly build of containerd that's used in testing. So anyway, in this particular case, I think it's pretty easy to just go ahead with this unless there are concerns, because I think we'll pretty much anyway revert it by the time 1.19 is released, and there will be a new version at some point that contains these fixes.
Yeah, I don't love the idea of doing something which we're just going to revert, but I think it's acceptable in this case. I'll probably personally take a look at like being able to the thing we talked about, where we're able to override the targz. I feel like that would, if we had that, that's what I would say we should do, and so I will try to make sure we have that. But in the absence of that, I guess it's okay to temporarily use.
But anyway, that's a nice feature to add for 1.19. So I think I will take a look and add it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
No
and so I'm fine with trying this this targz from Docker for now. I would like in general to like do the things we talked about, where we're closer to having our artifacts in locations that we better control, or have like better policy or our own policies around. And but in this case, I think it's okay.
Okay, containerd is default.
I know we discussed in the past that containerd may be a good default at some point as container runtime. Do we want it for 1.19, or do we want to wait a bit more until, let's say, 1.20 or something?
Well, my question is that, do we want to do it for new clusters only, or do you want to do it for Kubernetes greater than?
New clusters only. So it will be like, it will be in create cluster, for example.
It is a tricky one. I feel like we should. It might actually be better to do it like on 120 or like on a version barrier and do it for everyone. What can I propose? I know that there are ongoing challenges with containerd, just as there are with Docker. Like there are always problems, and I don't know what the state of it is in terms of which one. Like I don't know what GKE is recommending. I don't know what EKS is recommending. I don't know what everyone is recommending, and I have a feeling that GKE is not recommending or is not defaulting to containerd right now, and I can try to find out why and whether that's something that would apply to us as well.
Just wanted to discuss about it now that 1.19 is pretty early, so that we don't remember in 2 months when it's a bit too late to do it.
I'd like to get a little bit of history on it as an option. I mean,
Okay.
how many people running Containerd right now?
Well,
So
it's not released, so.
So let's get some history with it released first.
Okay, so you're saying to see how it goes with 118.
Yeah.
And people using it. Okay, sounds good to me.
Oh, and sorry, if you open an issue, I will try to find out what are the known issues with Containerd in general and try to add it there, as it were.
Okay, I will make an issue and say make Containerd the default container runtime for 120. And let's see what people say there. Okay, and the last thing from this part is Bazel builds. Now that, well, I've been looking at making the images for kops build for ARM64. I've been pretty successful with them, but there's still the question of what's the plan here? Do we want to keep having both Docker files and Bazel build, or do we want just one of them? I don't mind doing both of them, but it's a bit confusing in some cases. I think at least the Docker files may be a bit out of sync.
I can speak a little to this. We started with Docker files. I think tried, or we've started using Bazel more. So there were both of them. And for the newer images, like the Kube API server health check sidecar, that is only built in Bazel today. The intent was to basically my intent was to go to Bazel. I think KK is having a little bit of a debate with Bazel right now, and I'm not sure whether they are, like, who's winning that debate right now. It puts us in a sort of difficult position because Bazel is nice for, like, Bazel has its quirks in terms of syntax, but it is nice for being able to build repeatably, and I feel like it's easier to build a correct build with Bazel, but that's my opinion. Just from, like, some of our make files have not been as reliable, I guess, or reproducible.
So I think Bazel it's quite reliable, lacks some features that don't seem important to them, but are important to us. Though Docker files are a bit easier for most people to understand. From my point of view, we can keep building Bazel mostly, but it would be nice to decide at least for images, because as I said, I think those are out of sync. And some people might try Docker files and end up with different things.
If it wasn't for the fact that KK was having their debate with Bazel, I would say let's go to Bazel. That was sort of our plan. That's been our plan all along, and we've been, like, gradually getting there. And I think in 1.16, like, we switched DNS controller to be Bazel. Like, we're gradually going more and more Bazel. And I think the only one that's left, I think, is ProtoCube, which is the one that has the complicated packages, which we're also going to get rid of. And I saw your PR to do that. Thank you. I guess if we're not going to make anything worse by just doing Bazel for ProtoCube, so we can make things better by going to Bazel for ProtoCube, because at the same time we'll go to distroless. And we're not making our situation significantly worse, because we already have to, if we decide across Kubernetes that we're going to move away from Bazel, we already have to reverse out some images anyway. So it seems to me like if Bazel would make life easier for everyone, then we should do Bazel and finish that conversion and then?
My idea was to also remove the Docker files. I know that they may be nice to have to get started, but right now they are confusing because are out of sync and not maintained. So if you agree, I will remove those.
Yeah.
I agree with that. There's one weird one though. There's a Docker file that wraps the kops CLI, which I think some people use sort of as an easier way to, I don't know, to run kops or something. That one might be a sort of special case.
I meant the ones that we build and release. So API server, health check, DNS controller, kops controller, and protocube, I think.
Yeah, that would be great.
And by the way, sorry, related question. We have some component that I never heard about, Kube Discovery. Is that still needed? Or, I mean,
I think it's part of bare metal, so I think we can probably remove it. I will take an action item to remove it if need be. Does that make sense?
John already removed bare metal, so.
Not all of it.
Yes.
I tried.
Okay, so that's all from me. I think you're next, John.
Yes. Okay. So I've been trying to remove instance group from NodeUp model context to make it so that we don't have changes that if you edit an instance group and don't update the cluster, those changes don't actually affect your cluster. So been moving a bunch of stuff into the NodeUp context, or the NodeUp config, but the problem is hooks or file assets might be potentially too large to fit in user data. So looking for guidance there, whether that is actually the case for people that it might be too large, and if it is possible, then do we have to come up with some other mechanism, like a per launch configuration directory in the VFS?
And so specifically, the question is whether people here have
Yeah.
like data are using those hooks or file assets.
Yeah.
And the canonical example of things is if you are putting keys into your file assets, like PKI keys, certificates, those compress particularly poorly and are particularly likely to send you over the edge, over the limit.
I think we are.
It would be good to know how big your data is then.
I will have a deck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then here's a big one. So the in-tree cloud providers have apparently been deprecated for a while in KK, but we're still using them. And I was wondering if we wanted to start moving towards the out-of-tree cloud providers instead.
We should support them. I don't want to be the first to move to them. Some clouds, I think OpenStack, for example, actually runs. So it's and I think it would be a great service to the community if we were to, for example, turn on the GCE Cloud Controller Manager and turn on the AWS Cloud Controller Manager and run tests with those, because I don't believe otherwise there are any tests on those today.
Okay. I thought it was a lot further along because they've been deprecated for a long time.
They've been deprecated, but I don't think the new one is recommended yet. And so I think we would be doing a service, but be aware that we would be doing a service and we would probably be finding things.
Okay.
So I think the answer.
There be dragons.
There be dragons. It would be great to add. Honestly, it would be great to add that support. But I would very much oppose anyone that said we should make it the default or mandatory in any version less than 20.
Okay.
For example, the AWS cloud provider, external cloud provider, only has a 118 alpha tag. So a very narrow use case at the moment, but I'm sure that'll get better.
Okay. Rodrigo, backup store for etcd backups.
Yeah, so before we had etcd manager, we had this flag that let us change where the backups went. I tried using it recently because my cluster lists, kops list clusters were getting very, very slow. And when I dug into that, I found out that, well, AWS, when we use that, we list all the files under a certain path in the bucket. And AWS doesn't have a better way for you to do it for S3. And this starts becoming very, very slow when you have all your backups in the same path as you have your configs, which my users are complaining about. So I tried moving and my backups to a different location, which, well, pretty much completely breaks etcd. Because it's pretty much hard-coded to look at the configuration and put the backups in a specific place right now. So I tried overriding the path, which would need to add a base parameter to manage file. That feels a little bit hacky. I have that diff out, but I'm not sure if I like it truthfully. The other options I thought about is just modifying etcd to accept an additional parameter for where the backups actually go, or just completely removing backup store once we remove the legacy etcd manager. But I don't really like that option because I'd really like to move my backup somewhere else. Does anyone have any opinions of which path we should go down?
We should probably support, we should support setting that flag and not breaking things. I will have a look at the details of the PR to see. It feels like the flag that you have here seems reasonable. I'll look into what's going, I'll try to understand better exactly what's going wrong. Another thing is on the root issue, I thought S3 let you pass a delimiter and would return directories. So it might be we can do something smarter there to, I don't know, like, I don't know how efficient that is.
From looking around, I'm not sure if they do, or I know GCS does.
I might be confused there then. Okay.
I looked very, very hard because that was actually the path
Okay.
I went down first, and I did not find anything that would do that for S3. Yeah.
Okay. So that's, yeah. We could, I mean, we could always, maybe we could more carefully list anyway, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you could take a look at that. It'd be great. Okay, Jason.
I'll definitely have a look.
Okay, so for my rolling update changes in 118, I put in a PR for, previously I had it so if you set both the maximum surging and max unavail to 0, that would be what disables rolling update for an instance group. And thinking about that, I thought maybe having a separate explicit field would be clearer. And so then the question is what the name of this field should be. I put in enabled false, but it doesn't actually disable rolling updates entirely. It still taints the nodes that need updating, and I also made it that if you set surging, it would surge, but it won't do the eviction and it won't terminate the instances. So I was wondering if a better name of drain and delete or whether there would be a better name than enabled false.
I like the notion of, well, if you make it enabled false and you make it the overall thing, someone's going to say that it's a bug if it doesn't, if it still taints.
Yeah.
Right. So if the intent is that you will later add the ability to turn off the tainting, then that's fine. Or someone later adds that, and then enabled is a good name. If it's the case that we'd say, well, actually, like, let's just hold where it is and that's it, then we should rename it something like, as you say, drain and, I don't understand the delete comment, but like drain.
I mean, drain and terminate, yeah, that might be
What is? Oh, but we terminate either way, don't we? What is the
Yeah,
terminate?
yeah.
Okay, so just draining, like, and you could imagine someone that, excuse me, you could imagine someone that doesn't want to drain a. You could imagine
Well,
a scenario.
there's a flag which tells it not to drain, so it will just terminate without draining. This is not that.
Okay.
So I don't want to just say drain, because you're disabling both draining and terminating. And I didn't really have the intention of turning it off entirely.
We can kick around some names on the PR if no one has any better names.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll move on to the next one. Peter.
Yeah. I think we have a lot of big efforts that are currently scheduled for 119. I thought it'd be useful to kind of get updates on each one. I listed some that were in my mind, but there are probably others if people want to add them. Just starting with the OIDC support IAM roles for service accounts. Justin and I were working on, I think we're at 4 PRs now. They're all overlapping, or maybe 3. The goal is to create in AWS, an AWS OIDC provider and be able to link service accounts to IAM roles. Our current initial implementation is going to be the Kube API server provides the JOCS documents, and rather than publishing them somewhere on the internet, we're going to start with exposing those through the API load balancer directly, which involves making sure the API load balancer is public, that it's using public DNS, that we have anonymous auth for those endpoints, and getting that working all behind a feature flag, and only for Kubernetes 119, I believe. And then later on, we'll be able to iterate on that and work towards taking those documents and publishing them somewhere public, presumably an S3 bucket or something like that. But that would be a bit more secure because we're not exposing the API load balancer, and so it'll work with more people's clusters. I don't know if Justin has anything to add on that.
Wonderful summary. Yeah, I mean, I just, looking at the list, it's going to be sort of a pattern where we are trying to get it in with a configuration behind a feature flag. It's not necessarily going to be a feature we will recommend running with that configuration. It's more just like, in order to get it in, we have to go through some steps, and like this is a configuration that will work and start to exercise the functionality, and then we can sort of add the rest of the functionality in a gradual way. It's a really great feature, right? Like the ability that the thing it gives us is that our pods are able to have, including our system pods, are able to have very specific IAM roles for just the permissions they need. And so DNS controller is the only pod now that has the DNS, I think only pod, that has the DNS permissions.
So are we going to be creating additional IAM roles beyond just the master and nodes roles?
That's, I mean, yes, behind a feature flag, and it's open for discussion, but yes, that's how I'm imagining us doing it. And if you turn on the 2 feature flags, I think it's use pod in the PR that I proposed, it's use pod IAM and public JWKS or something like that. The behavior is and you're using a load balancer with a load balancer, and the load balancer is public, and you set those feature flags, then it will configure AWS Web Identity. It will create another instant IAM role, I think. It will create a service account it will associate the DNS controller service account to the IAM role, and the IAM role has just the DNS controller permissions. And so yes, in that set of yes, we get where we would go with this, and it's obviously like open for discussion, is that we would have five or six maybe IAM roles instead of that are per pod rather than the master's role, which is the union of those 6 roles.
Cool. And then the next on my list was add-on operators. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yes, this will be another one that I think we'll have to follow the pattern even more. You know, we're doing all this work on add-on operators and around being able to. The problem we have in kops is, I guess, a narrower problem. With our burning problem is being able to update add-ons without having to do a binary release of kops. There's this cluster add-on subproject of SIG cluster lifecycle that is investigating also basically creating add-on operators to that we would have a Calico add-on operator, for example, and so we would create that operator, and the operator would be responsible for deploying updated versions of Calico and for monitoring Calico and reporting health of it, things like that. There has been some excellent feedback from John around like the security model of this, and I would maybe associate it to the JWKS case, where like the initial implementation is likely to be not something we would recommend for people that are you know, like particularly security or more security conscious, and we aim to get there. I think there's a very open debate about the extent to which we can even start that ball rolling right now, or whether we need to like clean it up more before we even start. Like, we can argue that the JWKS thing is probably okay. I think there's a very open question about are the add-on operators at that point yet. I don't know, John, if you want to comment on the gotchas.
Yeah, well, yeah, basically our requirements are we need to have our production pulling from our own registry, and we want to make sure everything goes through lab before it gets into production. So things that just upgrade things from directly downloading of the internet, just not possible. And I also concerned about the privileges needed to allow an operator to install new things. And I prefer to have installation done with as little code as possible.
Yeah, and so the one approach is that we try to figure out how to make the operators work in a way that generates manifests out more or less as we do today, where we can generate them on the client side and sort of like able to run in either mode, the pre-generation more secure or the post-generation more dynamic, more flexible way. And like, we don't know yet whether we can get it in behind a feature flag in the dynamic YOLO mode, or whether we need to wait for the existence of the pre or static safer mode.
Cool. And then next was the cluster API support.
This is further off. Maybe we'll see. But yes, I continue to try to add, again, behind a feature flag and purely optional, the ability to, where I intend to start is replace or running an instance group backed by a machine deployment. So the cluster API equivalent, and not for control plane nodes, only for worker nodes.
And that also involves not accessing S3 or the state store for nodes. Is that correct?
Probably does. We've talked about that as a good idea anyway. It certainly becomes a lot more complicated if we, if you want to actually dynamically, I think we could, if you want to dynamically create a new kops instance group, yes, it would likely require that, because we probably don't want to be writing to S3 from there. But I think we could probably back a pre-created, we could have some mode where we could, in the kops client, create an instance group, which would be backed by machine deployment, and then that would be able to access S3, because the files would be there just fine. So that would be exactly the same mode of operation. It's just the dynamic creation case probably requires us to rethink where we source those instance group YAMLs from.
Cool. ARM64 support. Pac-Man, do you want to take that one?
Okay, thank you. Yesterday, the main PR for worker nodes was merged. So, yay, we have support for ARM64. I think after looking a bit, we could make masters work on ARM64 quite easily. I will submit a PR for the Docker images to be built also for ARM64 using Bazel. But we have to discuss a bit the protocube one and see if my approach is okay. And I think the main blocker, well, the only one remaining, is etcd manager. I know that Justin started something there, saw the PR, but I don't think there's anything else. So once that's done, we should have full support for ARM64.
I think possibly the next step would be to be able to run a cluster without any AMD worker nodes. So to make sure that everything we have that runs off the masters have ARM64 images.
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
To make it possible to run a cluster where, although the control plane is on AMD, where all the worker nodes are on ARM. Because right now I think we have some things which run on worker nodes that don't have ARM images.
Yes, there are some. Let's say.
So maybe an effort to get those to be dual arch.
Yeah, I think there are a few things there that would be good to fix, like kubedns. It's not the multi-arch image referenced, it's the AMD one. So most of them are pretty simple to fix because there are such images for a long time. There are some more quirky ones like the autoscaler used in DNS that they don't have a multi-arch image, but they have multiple images for ARM AMD. They didn't use Docker manifest something to create a single one. And this is actually something that we will have to debate for our own images, like the names and which ones we want to push to repos, which ones we want to sideload. Because as it is now, we have 3 images that are pulled from repo, protocube that it's sideloaded, and I don't know, it's Kubernetes has a naming convention, and as we didn't have this problem yet, well, until now, we never discussed it. But I think it's not the call to discuss it. Should be a longer discussion and maybe discuss it in an issue first, or I don't know.
Yeah, I just try to propose a next milestone.
So one of the next milestones proposed by Peter was to add some kind of periodic testing. This involves adding 1 or 2 new parameters. We have to be able to specify the image differently for master and control plane and worker nodes to define the cluster. As just the masters will be on AMD 64 and the workers will be on ARM 64. And at the moment, there's no way to create such a cluster. We have only the instance type.
Is that a limitation in the kops create cluster flags or in the kube test flags?
Create cluster flags, I think. It should be pretty easy to add.
Yeah, I don't think it's a limitation of our schema, right? So it's just the create cluster layer. There is also there is a PR that I have well, we have the set commands as well. I don't know whether we could use those. It would probably have to be a new syntax to make that work there. So I'm in favor of a flag in this case.
Okay, I will work on creating and adding some testing. For sure it fails at the moment in some cases because I don't really think kube test or SIG testing was thinking about testing ARM stuff. Or I don't know, there aren't many tests for that. Last time I checked, many things were missing.
I mean, it's very reasonable to add a test that we don't have high hopes for initially. We have intention for. I'm more optimistic than you that kube test will not be a problem, but I guess we'll see.
I already tested it when I
Okay.
created my first version of the PR 2 months ago. I hacked the create and had a special PR just to test it. And about 50 or 60 tests failed out of 600. And most of those tests were related to storage. And because kube test was pulling the AMD version of BusyBox something. But it's pretty good for this thing to have most tests passing.
Yeah, that's point of a kube test is the framework that runs the ETE tests. I think you're saying the ETE tests fail on, or some of the ETE tests fail on ARM. This may be better, and I think there was actually discussion, like some of those may have been fixed. The SIG testing folks, in particular Ben the Elder, raised a topic that the Kubernetes project ships a lot of architectures for which they have no test coverage, or for which we have no test coverage. So once again, this would be a great thing for us to do. I don't think we should feel like we are on the hook for making the EDE tests pass. It will be a good contribution. I think it is a sufficient contribution for us to get the testing going and let those SIG storage, in this case, I guess, like replace their BusyBox image.
I think I will ping again the SIG testing people. I already asked them once, but I will ask them again if they're interested in using kops or whatever, helping fix the ARM64 tests.
Yeah, I mean, everyone would love to see those tests, like not just in kops, but in the project, I'm sure. Like we want to know if it doesn't work on ARM. That's important. Like AWS has ARM chips, and we'll see what happens next week with Apple. So I'm sure that like their ARM is increasingly relevant. So like I think everyone wants to make sure it works on these platforms. So
well, anyway, I'm very happy it got in and looking forward for people to test it. And I think if we get etcd manager to be multi-arch, it's very reasonable to have full support for it in 1.19.
Okay, release automation.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could make progress moving towards K8's infra. Specifically, I guess there's the artifacts prod GCS bucket and the kops GCR repo, what we could do to start moving forward with those.
I had done like that's something like a couple of weeks ago. I'll take another look. I lost sight of this. Thank you.
Yeah, because we push kops controller to a staging GCR repo right now. So it'd just be a matter of, I believe, promoting the image manifest in the kh.io repo, maybe, as well as pushing any other images that we want posted on GCR.
I can take a look. That sounds at least the images, the container images, I think should be smoother sailing at this point. So I'll see where we are.
Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah, I want to mention some things I'm doing. I'm working on reducing the lifetimes of some of the certificates we have. I've gotten most of the easy ones. I'm having a bit of a trouble with the API server server cert, mostly because that wants the IP address of the load balancer. So that means if we're going to have it generated by NodeUp, we have to get the user data generated after the load balancers are generated. And I'm probably going to have a problem with OpenStack, which seems to have that code hooked into the scaling group, not a separate load balancer. So I'm wondering if I'm going to get a circular dependency there. So if anyone knows about OpenStack, I'd appreciate some help with that. The other one I'm doing is trying to get ready for switching to or introducing a v1 beta 1 API in 1.20. So I'm trying to make sure that 119 is able to be downgraded to once we go to a 120, which has v1 beta 1. And so that's why I'm trying to get all of the stuff into NodeUp config.
Awesome.
Peter, release cadence.
Yeah, we were talking in Slack a few days ago about how Kubernetes 119 is delayed August, September. I don't know exactly, but there's this list that we just discussed and some more stuff that is targeted for kops 119. But if we want to follow our pattern of waiting a month or two after Kubernetes releases stable, that's a lot of features that may be ready sooner that are not getting released in kops until September. So if there's something that we could do, we were throwing around ideas of like adjusting how we do our pre-releases or focusing on features that are not specific to Kubernetes 119 and getting those in and then doing pre-releases so that people could use those and know that they're more stable for Kubernetes 118 and earlier, or some sort of intermediate minor version release or feature release between 118 and 119 somehow. I don't know if anyone has other ideas or.
So which features are you talking about?
Well, the one that was mentioned was my instance types support for dynamically getting instance types. But other ones, just looking at this list, like I think the certificate lifetimes could be useful. I don't know if anyone has any other stuff that they care about.
I'd just as soon wait.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, one of the things we could also do is like get our 119 beta out for like, there are going to be a lot more features in there. Let's get people like get that beta out in a timely way so that people can try those features. And like, there are a lot of features, so let's have a longer beta period and make use of that. Specifically on the instance type one, I feel like that's a reasonable one to backport or to add the support for the new instance types. Like that's what people really want, right? They want to run these new instance types. And I saw someone did a PR trying to do it against 118, which is, I guess, the alternative. So I I think that's more of a bug fix, and that like the way I did it originally wasn't like adaptable, and this is a way that is more adaptable to changes. And so that to me, like putting that into 118 is an acceptable risk, but or an acceptable thing, but we can. The alternative is to just like continue to release 118 releases, patch releases, yeah, when a new instance type comes along using the generate machine types script, I guess.
So I think let's first take a step back. When do you see, Justin, 118 released? Realistically.
I mean,
1 month, 2 months.
I'm
2 months. I think I was hoping we could maybe do it in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I feel like it's less. It's a month or two, like a month or less. Like I feel like we're in reasonable shape there. I feel like I don't know how people feel in general. Like it's about what people think. Like I'll turn that question around. What does everyone think?
2 weeks would be great. I'm really looking forward to some of those features.
Yeah, I mean, I listed what I think is the one blocker. If we want to move forward into that section, and maybe these new instance types are, I don't know. What do people think the blockers are for 118?
From my point of view, is pretty much in good shape right now. But I would go ahead with Peter's describe instances, because this is always something people are very unhappy when they cannot install it on some whatever new instance. And I would go about adding that, and if you, John, want something else,
yeah, because I want the rolling updates thing, because I want to get the API right when it's in the first. I don't want to make an incompatible API change. So let's get the incompatible API change in before we release.
I agree with you. So those two, I would get those in. Cut a release candidate to be something that people actually try, and if everything goes okay, in 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, we can release 118. Or I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't done release candidates in the past. I don't know whether we should do that. It's a nice signal that like we do that. I think we've sort of made the betas be something we think of as release candidates.
Yeah.
Okay, or a new beta, something that we can say that we plan to have this as the final.
I like that idea. Yes, we won't disrupt our naming scheme, but we will like put words that make it suggest it's are intended to be our final beta before release. I like that a lot.
So a beta 2. Well, let's go through the other ones. Well, actually, 119 alpha 1. I think we should cut one of those. Really. And I think we need, because of the CVEs, we want 117 and 116.
Sounds good.
Let's see, do we still need the AMI cut?
Yes, I need to do that because it's 117. It's the last of the end of the era, the dying days.
Yeah.
Although I must say the username having changed gets me every time. 5 years of memory that it is admin is just like,
Okay, anything else? Okay, well, Thank you. That was a meeting.
Thanks
On
for
time.
hosting, John.
Okay, one thing from me. I backported all the fixes that I know of for the CVEs. So those should be okay, but didn't get to start any of those. So I will try to do it to actually start a cluster with those things. So if other people could try 117, 116 to see if they're still actually working, would be nice.
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm also trying to get them into the test, into our like ridiculous grid of every possible combination. I can't remember where I got to on that. So I'll have a look and see whether we have those working. I think that I think this is the sequence of like how I started doing things, is like we didn't publish the artifacts in the right way, and so I was like, that's probably where I got to. But anyway.
By the way, regarding testing, not sure if anyone noticed yet, but me and Peter added tests for network plugins. So right now, when you do a PR for Calico, Cilium, or something, it will run the test with that network provider or something.
As a pre-submit.
Yeah, pre-submit.
Ooh, nice.
That is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
I have to look at how you did that. I'm like, that seems like magic.
Okay. Well.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great one, guys.
Thanks.